Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian. I'm co-founder at Ruby Reese and at dognutrition.ie, and I'm also going to be your podcast host. This week, we are speaking with an absolute legend of the podcast, that is Anne from Annie Ed. And we will be speaking about a topic that's really, really important for us all to talk about lots and lots and lots. I think many of our listeners will have, would have had an adopted four-legged friend come in and share their lives and their homes with them. And many of you will be aware of some of the absolute benefits, but also some of the challenges associated with that. So I'm really delighted to have had the opportunity to speak with Anne about such an important topic. Before we dive into that, I would like to dedicate this episode and a huge shout out to Olga, who sent in an email. She's a frequent podcast listener and came in with a very related topic idea to the one that we're going to be speaking about today. And we will definitely be picking up this very specific angle on that topic in the future. And I hope that gives some of you some encouragement as well, that we are really, really open to hearing from you and what you'd like to hear about, because we really, really always are looking for new and exciting topic ideas. And if you can push us in the right direction, we're only delighted to have that. So for Olga and for all of you amazing audience members and listeners, we now invite you to listen in to the chat that I had with Anne. Hello, Anne. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for coming back on and chatting with us.
My pleasure.
Would you do us the pleasure of introducing yourself briefly for anyone that might not have heard you on this podcast before or already know you from somewhere else?
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Anne Rogers, and I am from a company called Annie Ed, which stands for Animal Education. And it's nothing to do with my name. And we provide private education for pet guardians, professionals, and people entering the animal training, care and behaviour industries. My background is, well, it's in everything really. So I started out in veterinary nursing. I've since gone on to complete formal degrees in biochemistry. I've done a lot of work in relation to animal and human learning. And we really, our big thing is providing educational resources for everything about dogs, basically. Dogs, and more dogs. Don't ask me about other animals. I know very little. So just
amazing. Well, I know very little about other animals either. So we're in good company, and we'll stick to the dogs.
Yes, stick to dogs. Yes, absolutely.
So we're going to be talking very, very specifically about adopting dogs today and rescuing dogs, I guess. So before adopting dogs, I think let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
What should people maybe be considering before they decide, I want that one?
Okay. So I think one of the things that tends to happen is we frame getting a dog in a certain way. And so instead of going, well, what dog do I want? What type of dog do I want? What look do I want? Or what, background story kind of speaks to me? Instead, I want people to ask themselves a couple of questions. And the first one being, what can I offer a dog? So what realistic resources do I have available to offer this dog? And then what expectations do I have of my new dog? So where are we going with this? What do I hope to have, in what timeline? Imagine how I might live with this dog. What does that look like in 3 weeks' time, in 4 weeks' time, in 6 months' time, or whatever timeline you wanted to talk about, but really about considering the realities. And I think that's particularly important because social media has brought the beautiful pictures and the very sad stories right into our everyday. It's very difficult to avoid. We're reading about that, and it's appealing to emotion for sure. And that might not contribute to the best decisions being made all the time. And when we're considering such a lengthy commitment, right? We're hoping that our dog lives, 10, 15 years, hopefully, that we will have all of that time with them, and that it is such a commitment. And I don't want to turn anybody off it, but I would prefer that people question the decision rather than go in at it whole, all guns blazing and kind of not really considering it carefully. So that's what I would like people to do before they even start looking at all the sad stories and cute pictures. Because once
Yeah.
that happens, and
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
before you
Emotion
meet
takes
them.
over.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. If you meet them, I mean, that's the end, isn't it, really? I'm exactly the same once you
Yeah.
meet them.
No, definitely. And I mean, that makes total sense. And I think it makes a lot of sense as well to sit down and think what you can offer and what,
Yeah.
like, maybe even like write out what your life looks like with this dog that you're envisaging, like
Yeah.
it's, because, you might love the look of certain dogs and like the idea of going for hikes that are like 3, 4, 5 hours long every weekend, but like when was the last time you did one of those hikes? And maybe try doing 2 or 3 of those first
Yeah.
before
On your own.
before adopting a dog that you have to drag with you.
Yeah. And also the reality of the timelines, which I think is what we're probably going to talk a lot about today, is, this expectation that this dog is just going to settle into your current lifestyle. And nobody's coming out of this unchanged, basically. So what you look like, what your life looks like, probably what your home and possibly your garden looks like, a few months down the line after welcoming a new dog is not necessarily what we envisage, and certainly not necessarily what we're told to expect, because there's a certain kind of white picket fence, dream of this perfect dog that's, who's going to slot in and provide all of these things, because all of the propaganda surrounding getting a dog tells us all the ways that dogs benefit humans.
Yeah.
Right.
And like on top of that, I suppose it's important to point out as well, this isn't just to do with adopted dogs. This like picture perfect world, like, from whatever toilet paper ad you want to go with, it's not just about Labrador puppies jumping around the place.
Yeah.
There is more to having a dog than just the good stuff. And,
massively so. And also we have to really consider, and this is kind of, a hill I'll die on, but we have to consider that a lot of that positive publicity about the human-canine relationship is very much a result of some publication biases. So dog stories and positive dog stories are really healthy clickbait, and nobody wants to hear negative stories about human-canine relationships unless they're very specific about certain sort of demon dogs, dogs that look like my dog, and then it's all that's the clickbait of it. So the whole understanding of human-canine relationships is incredibly anthropocentric, and to be perfectly honest with you, the data that does exist doesn't really bear that out. There is very little convincing valid data that tells us that that shows or demonstrates that dogs are overwhelmingly beneficial for people. And nobody wants to hear that, right? Everybody wants to think, oh, well, dogs save children and they prevent heart attacks and they minimize loneliness and all of these sorts of things. And really what we've forgotten to ask is, what about the dog's experience? Just because they live in our lives doesn't mean they're experiencing a good standard of welfare, doesn't mean they're having a good time, doesn't mean, the question really needs to be, are we good for dogs?
Are we good for dogs? That's
right?
A good question. Yeah.
And that is the question that we need to start asking. So in that vein, then, would I be good for a dog? If I take this dog on, what resources do I have to be good for that dog? What expectations am I expecting that will, kind of form or structure a good life for that dog?
And now that we're, fully feeding this idea of us having our God complex and kind of controlling what the dog's life is all about, let's make it a bit more complex. Okay. Let's imagine we have 1 or 2 other animals or other dogs in the house, and now we're controlling what their family looks like and what this newcomer is coming into as well. So what do we need to consider if we already have pets at home?
This is probably the most important consideration, because the first question we have to ask is, does our resident dog or cat or whatever pets you have, do they really want to live with another dog? They don't have the opportunity to sit down and consider these, very tricky questions. For dogs and our other pets as well, it just happens to them.
Mhm.
So, we often hear about people wanting to get a second dog for their existing dog, the dog they already have. And, the question often is, do you think another dog would help?
Yeah.
And if there are behaviors of concern with the first dog, which is usually the context in which I'm having this conversation, it's probably not the best time. And it's very important here that when we talk about behavior, that there are no absolutes. So at no point can I say never, and at no point can I say always. But certainly, there's a lot of nuance that we have to apply, which can be difficult. Which is why you want to have, a kind of a private consultation about this, and really, so that you can get that information that's individual to that family. But certainly, and I mean, we were just having this conversation that one of the main reasons, or one of the top reasons, that dogs will bounce, so they'll go back to rescue after having gone out into a home, is for whatever reason not working in with the existing pets, so with the resident pets. And one of the most common responses on adoption forms, where a person might be asked some version of the question, what possible reason could you imagine that this dog wouldn't work out in your home? One of the top responses there is that, well, if they didn't get on with Fluffy the cat, or Bobby the Labrador, or whoever that is. And because our expectations of new dogs tend to be wildly unrealistic, and the timelines tend to be vastly underestimated, new dogs and the existing pets are often put into situations that they should never be put into. And the integration is really crucial, really crucial.
And by integration here, I'm sure you're talking about a slower and more gradual process than just bonking them into the boot of the car together and saying, you are now family, right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the things that we kind of have a hierarchy of priorities that we need to go through when we're bringing a new dog home. And the first thing that has to happen is that dog needs time to develop a feeling of safety and experiencing safety, first of all. And then they need time to develop relationships, healthy attachment relationships with their humans. Because that is going to, no matter what else happens, that has to be the central focus for health and welfare for everybody. And then they need time to develop healthy relationships with the other animals in that household, whatever that may look like. And so there will be separate goals at all of those stages. But also, really crucially, is there will be different behavior markers. So what I mean by that is how do we tell that on our journey to helping our new dog settle in, is this dog ready for the next level of whatever we're going to do to them? And so that means that we have to become better at establishing criteria that are observable behaviors that tell us, okay, this is a good indication that we're ready for the next level of challenge, and the next level of challenge, and the next level of challenge. And we refer to those as behavior markers in our field. So by learning to identify what those criteria might be, then that will allow you to structure a kind of a settling in program to help that dog and set everybody up for success, hopefully, as best as we possibly can, really.
What we want to see. And you mentioned about settling in. So, like, what kind of role, and I'm particularly thinking about, the first couple of days once this dog is potentially coming into your new home. Decompression, is this important? Are they going to be somewhat overwhelmed maybe by a whole new situation, by new people and or other animals?
Absolutely.
What are we looking at here?
100%. Like beyond overwhelmed. It's not even funny. So we're talking here about all the preparation that a prospective adopter can do for our dogs. It just happens to them. They have no opportunity to understand that this is going to happen to them. And even if they've come from a really crappy situation into an absolutely lovely situation, the actual act of moving dogs, and I can't emphasize this enough, is probably one of the worst things that we do to them in terms of the impacts on their behavior. And no matter whether that dog, like I say, was in a really terrible situation, and should be relieved to have got out of there. Or, you know, and even if they're coming into the absolutely most wonderful dog world, dog life, the changes really are what the challenge is. So when that happens, whenever the body is faced with any sort of challenge, and I like to replace the word stress with challenge because I think it's sometimes an easier kind of way to kind of understand that or visualize it. So you can imagine then what has happened, right? Even they've come from a place that maybe was terrible, maybe wasn't very nice, maybe they didn't have lovely things, but it was predictable. They knew what was going on. It was their lot, even if it wasn't ideal. And now we've suddenly pulled the rug from underneath them. And now they don't know where the monsters are. They don't know what's going to happen. They have lost whatever social relationships they once had, even if, again, they weren't ideal. They're gone. So that loss of all of that, and now they're put into a new world where they are not capable of understanding where the monsters are. They don't know where they toilet. They don't know where they sleep. They don't know where they drink. They don't know where they eat. They don't know how to escape. They don't know where they hide. They don't know where they're going to be, you know, have space to move about or play or explore. They don't know any of that stuff. And there is no way of us to tell them. They have
you can't
to
give them a
experience.
guidebook.
Right. Wouldn't it be wonderful?
Yeah.
But we can be their guide if we behave appropriately. So we have to learn a little bit about how we support them. And the first thing I suppose to do is to understand their experience and what we kind of can understand or what we can know about that. And obviously we can't know exactly what another individual experiences, but we can certainly look at their behaviour. There's a little bit of data from some biomarkers. So from some tells that the body gives us, some information the body gives us about their experiences. So when we are under stress like that, and I say we because we're mammals, and all the mammals, we have this pretty similar stress responses, right? Pretty similar equipment that we have for that, and pretty similar way of coping with that. And the first thing to understand about stress is that it can be good, it can be tolerable, it can be bad, it can be distressing, and it can be traumatic, or what's often referred to as toxic stress, right? So it can be all of those things, depending on that individual's genetic predispositions, early rearing conditions, and epigenetic effects. And epigenetic effects are just beginning to be studied. We're not fully there in terms of understanding this, but it's kind of epigenetic effects refer to things that happen, particularly to the young and developing individual, that will change how their genes, which genes are switched on or off. And it's a way of providing infants with information from their parents that tell them to prepare for the world you're going to live in. So, for example, we might have a mama dog carrying puppies, and she's emaciated. So she's going to prepare her puppies for living in a world that's short of food. So those puppies may be born with particular genes turned on or off that provide them with particular adaptations that allow for them to store glucose in certain ways, or to turn on or off certain stress-related behaviours earlier, so that they're going to rise to that challenge of lack of food and scramble or fight for food earlier on, for example. So those are the possibilities that can happen there. So all of that mix is probably done and in place by the time you are considering your adopted dog. So can't change it. That's happened now. So even by the time they're born, a lot of that stuff is in place, right? So it's happening from conception. So you might not have even known about your prospective dog, that could have been years ago, for example, in some cases. So that's the kind of foundation. And then all of the experience they've had from there will continue to inform how their brain is going to, their outlook on life, how their brain is going to prepare, whether their brain is going to come into a challenging situation and go, okay, what are the things I need to do to cope with this? Or whether their brain is going to come into this situation and go, oh crap, this is awful. I'm just going to, stay back here and pretend it's not happening, or respond in some other less than healthy way, right? So when that new dog comes along, depending on all of this mix of stuff that's happened before them, their brain is absolutely bathing their body in stress-related chemicals that turn on these responses. And if you imagine being brought to a completely new place where you don't know where safety is and you don't know where your safe base is, you don't know where anything is, you would imagine that the brain is preparing for extra vigilance, right? So it's turning on all of the things that gets the body extra vigilant, looking out for things. I'm aware, I'm awake. And of course, that's going to affect absolutely every system in the body. It's going to affect your immunity, it's going to affect sleep, it's going to affect metabolic systems, it affects every single one of them. And this is a pretty chronic scenario for new dogs, right? Because they're brought home, and we might see on social media, we might see this rule of 3 thing. Yeah, you've seen that before, that the first 3 days, is it 3 weeks and then 3 months or something along those lines. And I kind of don't like it a whole lot. And there's no real basis for it, first of all. I think it came from Karen London and Patricia McConnell's book on rescue dogs. They had this little kind of pamphlet book from way back when, and they kind of talked about it in very rough generalities, but then it kind of took a life of its own on social media and has become this structured thing. And those are timelines that I don't really match with. And also, if you look at like the instructions kind of underneath about what your dog is experiencing, it's all via the human lens. It's all about the dog. Does the dog fit in with people now? Does the dog understand the rules, or, are they testing the boundaries, or, all of this kind of via human lens stuff. And it's not really about behavior markers or dog behavior. So what this kind of, absolute bathing in stress chemicals does is this has a suppressive effect on behavior. And we call this initial period home the honeymoon period, right? Because the dog's body is telling them you need to keep a lookout because you don't know where the monsters are, so you got to learn all about that. Now, while you're keeping the lookout, don't make yourself too known because you don't want the monsters to find you, right? So strong distress will have a suppressive effect on behavior. So the dog is just like, okay, I'm just going to observe. I'm not going to do a whole lot because I don't want to be somebody's lunch, because I don't know if that's a possibility, right? Because that's what my brain is telling me. And remember, when the brain is telling the body this, the brain is telling the body your life is in danger. Our brains are terribly overreactive, right? Because the brain kind of has evolved to kind of tell us, well, it's better to be stressed than to be dead. Yeah. So, and this, of course, is why we're all biological messes, right? Because our stupid brains are telling us to worry about all these things. And of course, in evolutionary history, this is very relevant. It was telling us, our brain was telling us about predators at every turn, right? But, now this is switched on if we, have a dentist appointment or an exam or something like that, right? Yeah. Something that is less fatal. Or less potentially fatal, hopefully, whatever you need to have done at the dentist. And it's the same for our dogs. These are the same systems. This is, just because they can't verbalize it, it's not any less of an experience for them. So during this honeymoon period, their normal behaviors are suppressed. The normal personality isn't going to come out. Their normal effervescent, bubbly self isn't going to be there, right? Yeah. And so we assume, again, looking via our human lens, we assume, the dog is fine and he appears biddable. And look how tolerant he is of this other dog taking his food, or the postman coming in, or the cat running across him. And that's not so much necessarily that this dog is going, yeah, I'm all cool with these things, I love it, right? It's more so that, okay, I'm not going to jump out of my shell here because I don't want the monster to find me. Yeah. Right? So that suppressive kind of effect, we used to say, is probably present for about 4 weeks, right? And we've kind of had to extend that now because we're seeing new, I suppose, effects of life on dogs that are coming through the rescue system, and they're often showing lower levels of resilience, so the ability to bounce back, that bounce back ability from this moving from one place to another. And we're also seeing them being moved into worlds that may be less equipped to support them and help them. And then, of course, on top of all of that, the expectations of the humans to which they're exposed, their new family, their expectations are unrealistic and too high. And the internet told me that in 3 weeks you were going to be, 3 days you're going to be settled in, 3 weeks you were going to be, and 3 months you were going to be completely part of your new life. And the dog's brain is like, no, that's, I'm not working on that timeline, basically. Yeah. So what we want to do during this time is very much kind of wrap them in cotton wool, right? And the reason for that is not only because they're experiencing this overwhelm, but also, and again, if we think about it from our, in our way, because again, we're experiencing the same stressors, right, or the same stress effects. So if they do have negative experiences, then this is kind of where it becomes difficult for people, because it's a bit of an investment. We don't see the results of that for months or maybe even years down the line, right? But it's often consistently in the history of these dogs. So if you can imagine, if all of your systems are up here telling you be extra vigilant, right? That means that you are going to form much stronger fear memories. And that makes sense, because your body wants to be prepared for the next time you're exposed to this whatever scenario. And so your body is going to be extra vigilant, also really, really good at storing the slightest indicators of scary things happening or stressful things happening. And the parts of the brain, so the limbic system, the middle of the brain, that looks after stress responses is going to become extra sensitive. It's going to become better at responding to stress, quicker at responding to stress, and take longer to recover from that distress. Mm-hmm. So we want to really mind them, because they don't need any extra challenge right now. Moving was a challenge, and the biggest challenge we tend to throw at them. So we need to keep them really, really safe for this honeymoon period.
And I suppose, like, when we think about it, from our naive perspective, from the human perspective, we might see, oh yeah, they're moving from this one, let's say, rescue or whatever, an organization or wherever they happen to have been, from there to us. But that mightn't be their whole history. That might be, they may have moved around a couple of times.
Yes.
I think everybody involved, or anyone that's touched the industry at all in Ireland, will know how under pressure our amazing rescues are, and how our whole system is really, really under pressure and struggling. So they don't always have the luxury of being able to say our doors are open. Every dog that needs space has space. And they might need to be moved around to different kind of organizations, and just to do the what's possible for the dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this could be potentially, the second or third or fourth home that the dog has been maybe in not such a long time, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, when we talk about the age range of dogs that tend to become unwanted, and we just had the 2024 dog control stats released there this week, and we only need to look at rescue organisations up and down the country, and it's pretty consistent in other places like in the UK and in the US as well, that it's typically these adolescent dogs, right? So somewhere between 18 months and 3 years of age-ish, they tend to become unwanted. And that's often because they've become bigger and bolder and stronger, and they're showing adolescent behaviour. And I mean, we were teenagers too, and all of the people that were around us when we were teenagers probably wanted us, to relinquish us somewhere at some stage too, for sure. And it's totally understandable. Teenagers can be rough, but what we have to remember is teenagers are having a really tough time. And the parts of the brain that are developing in the adolescent are particularly affected by social stress, and a social stressor would be social isolation, but also the breaking of attachment relationships and the attempts at developing new secure attachment relationships, right? So that's a crucial thing that's happening during adolescence. And the adolescent brain is particularly sensitive to these sorts of stressors. So these dogs, and like you say, might have moved from their puppy home to their first home. Then they might have moved to the pound. Then they might have moved to a rescue organisation, and that rescue organisation might have had them in kennels, and then they might have gone to a foster, and then they might have gone to another foster. They might have gone to a home. They might have come back to, there can be a bit of a journey, right? And then they finally make it to this, which is, hopefully going to be forever, for the foreseeable anyway. And so this dog will have gone through a ton of that prior to ever getting home. So they've gone through cycles of this, right? And if at each of those stages they didn't have the support, like that we're talking about right now, to help them through that, moving might be even more distressing for them, and they might have an even harder time as a result of that. And we talk now about when we work with dogs that have come via rescue, which is super common. We work with those dogs all the time. We take a trauma assumed care approach, because we might not have a history on that dog, as in we might not know where that dog was born, what initially happened to him or her. They might have ended up in a pound, and that's really where the story starts. We don't know anything more. But just that experience of the pound and then the rescue and maybe kennel environment, and maybe with all the best will in the world, that in itself may be a significant contributor to trauma. And trauma refers to experiences or exposures, usually happen in early life, but don't always happen in early life. Traumas can absolutely impact adult animals, adolescent animals as well. It's just that the early life ones, the ACEs, so in relation to children, are the best studied, right? But early, kind of experiences, and then experiences that dog has had throughout life, can absolutely contribute to trauma, which really will cause changes to their behavior, long-term changes to their behavior, long-term changes to their resilience at both the behavioral and physical level. So that means that trauma is impacting our immunological health, our metabolic health, our every system, so cardiac, dermatological, all of the systems, right, are going to be impacted by that, because they're all part of one body, right? So they're all, dancing around. And so what it's doing is it's really reshaping the brain, and it reshapes the brain so that the animal develops a very specific outlook on life. And that outlook is bad things are going to happen. And I don't have the skills to control what happens to me. I don't have the behaviors that allow me to control what happens to me. And so a trauma assumed care approach, from the way that we work, which is a constructional approach to behavior, doesn't ask of that dog what's wrong with you or what terrible things have happened to you. It asks, what skills do you need to cope with your world? So what tools do I need to give you to help you deal with that? So that is going to be individual to that dog and their experiences and everything else. And it's going to be individual to that home environment as well.
And I suppose a lot of these skills are taught then or hoped to bring a little bit of confidence to your dog, help them to live with a little bit more agency, lots of things that we've spoken about in the past.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly it. So when you say decompression, I suppose the first level of that is that honeymoon period. And during that time, we're just making that dog's world very small, right? And we're going to help them feel safe. So that's security. And we're also going to keep them safe. So that means we're not going to have a big introductory party. We're not going to invite everybody over to meet the new dog. We're probably not going to do a whole lot of integrating the dog with the resident pets in that household. It might happen in other places, it might happen out on walks, for example. So there needs to be a facility there for separating and rotating dogs at that stage. And I will just say that I am super conservative about integrating resident and new dogs. And a lot of that's got to do with my experiences. I do a lot of work with bull breed dogs, but also I do a ton of work with integrating rescue dogs. And it takes time, because I'm not interested in, the goal isn't for those dogs to just look like their friends on that day. The goal is to build meaningful long-term relationships, which takes time. We wouldn't expect everybody to get on, just like that.
Yeah, you don't just sit down on a bus and make friends with the person that's right there, You might do, but...
Right, but it's not forever, necessarily. Right. Yeah. It might do you that bus journey.
It might.
And that might be the end of it.
It's definitely not guaranteed every single person you sit next to on every bus.
Definitely not. Oh my goodness, no. We should not go into life or go into buses expecting that. Yeah, that would
exactly
get you into all sorts of trouble. Yeah, for sure. Get you beaten up probably at some point. Went that way, very risky. So if we talk about this honeymoon period first, right? So I suppose if we start with that box, during that time, we're probably not having the dog and the other dogs or cats or whoever is living there integrating in the house at that point. So everybody's behind closed doors or fenced or whatever. And it'll depend on individual nuance and things like that as well. We're also not going to have them introduced to loads of new people and all the guests, and that's just not going to be a thing. So they're going to live a pretty small life. And really the first kind of, I suppose, set of goals are that they learn how to live in that home. So they learn where to toilet, they learn where they can eat, where they sleep, where it's comfortable, where they can hide, where they can avoid contact or avoid social interaction, how they can move around in space, how they can use space, and who their safe bases are. And really all I want new adopters to do at that point is just make good things happen for them.
Yeah.
Good things are free and abundant for these dogs.
And this sounds like it's a very slow process. So I think you mentioned like the honeymoon period can be quite an extended period of time. How long?
Yeah.
I know you don't want to I know you don't want to take away the 3, 3, and 3 and then replace it with a 4, 4, and 4.
Right.
But
so the first thing I'd say is rough timeline 4 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then the behavior markers the first level of behavior markers are going to be, does the dog know where they toilet? Can they get there safely? Are they showing behavior that indicates that they're resting, that they're sleeping normally, that they're starting to engage in normal dog behaviors, that they know where they can eat, they know that they can eat, so they're not eating where other animals are eating, they can't see other animals when they eat, other animals can't see them when they're eating, we're not kind of hovering around them when they're eating or when they're sleeping, or and this is a tricky one because this is during the period when the new adopter is going to be most motivated to do things with their new pet, but it's the time when they need to do the least things with their new dog.
I was going to say, this is like really tough, and I think it's worth calling it out because I'm sure lots of people that they've realized they want a dog, they've realized they want to adopt a dog, they've gone and done all the work, maybe they've gone and done loads of preparation, maybe they've set up their physical environment with loads of brilliant ideas, and they've maybe they've even started getting a community of dog professionals together that can be a support network for them and their their new budding relationship with their adopted dog. Like, many of them might have in their head, rather than 4 to 8 weeks, it might be 4 to 8 hours.
It's days. People would say, I took the weekend off to settle him in.
Yeah.
And the rest.
Yeah, we do it between Christmas and New Year's because it we've time off. Yeah, okay, so that makes a lot of sense, that it's like we need to be a little bit, and I think maybe allow ourselves patience as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point that we often don't talk about, because during that time, that's when your dog and you are making that connection. And it's also important that we're developing or putting foundations in place to develop healthy, secure attachment relationships and not reliant relationships. As in, if we start to put that dog into all sorts of crazy things, right, pushing them beyond what they're able to cope with, ultimately, they are going to be looking for, oh my God, what's the safest point? Okay, you're the consistent thing. I'm latching on to you.
Yeah.
And then they have no way of being able to cope with their world when you're not available. Right?
Yes. Okay. So you don't want to be that crutch.
Exactly. So we're putting the foundations in place to develop really nice, secure attachment relationships, rather than clinging to you because you're the beacon of, the only consistency that I've had since God knows how long, unfortunately, for that dog. So it's so important that we take a little bit of that time, and that can be a really nice time just to spend with them, while understanding that they're not able to show them their true selves yet. So you are there and you're going to get to witness the natural blossoming of them in your world that you've created for them. And particularly, like you say, that if they're an adopter who's put in, all this preparation and has set up all of this stuff, because we say, puppy proofing isn't just for puppies, it's for new dogs too, right? Yeah. If they're like 3-year-old dogs or 6-year-old dogs, or 10-year-old dogs even, they still are going to need. So I tell people to think you're getting a puppy, and put all the books up high, put all the wires out of the way, have confinement areas, think about toileting accidents so they're on hard floors and not your new beautiful rug, and that kind of thing. Don't buy them expensive beds initially, because you know where that's going. It's going to be shredded or toileted on, or both,
Yeah.
because that happens, right? So it's not just for puppies. So having all of that stuff in place is absolutely, you know, going to be a big head start for you. And the other thing that I'm going to mention now, which is deeply unpopular with people, and I'm sure will garner some questions, which is absolutely fine, is that we're not bringing those dogs out on walks at this time, right? Now, I will just preface by saying this. I'm not a huge fan of like suburban walks for dogs anyway. So even dogs are super settled. I don't think they're particularly beneficial for dogs. I think they're become patrols for them. You'll see them just going from pillar to pillar, you know, and reacting at the houses that have the dogs at the window or at the gate, you know, and that it's a bit, you know, it's a bit much. So I would have said that anyway. But and the reason for this is I don't want to expose this dog. Remember the experience that the body is having. Everything is about vigilance and not feeling safe. I don't want to expose them to uncontrolled environments. And we also have to remember that this dog has had very limited numbers of positive or even neutral exposures to their new world. So any negative exposure is going to be way more impactful. And remember what their brain is going to do. They're going to store that, and it's going to become the established memory that they have for that context.
Yeah.
So, you know, we wonder... Well, like, well, not we, because I know, but lots of people wonder why we see so many so-called reactive dogs out on walks. And in a lot of those dogs, I can see early on, when we trace early on, we can see that this exposure to these uncontrolled environments, too much too soon, is a big contributor to that.
Yeah. And I suppose like
popular, sorry.
No, and I think it's okay to talk about unpopular topics as well, because, you know, it's the reality of it. And I think you make such a valid point that, you know, for this dog, everything's going to be so new, you know, you don't necessarily always know what type of background they're coming from and what their setup was. So like you often hear of dogs that are, you know, that are adopted that have never seen stairs before. They don't understand how carpets work.
Yes.
You know,
especially like, you know, such good quality images are pretty weird.
Exactly, you know, and you know, there's lots and lots of stuff going on. They might not have happened to have a kettle in their old house, you know, and there's lots of things binging and whizzing and whatever in our homes that like we mightn't notice because they're normal, but like, you know, the fridge going onto a cool run or whatever.
That little click, lots of dogs have it. Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah,
exactly. So like, you know, there's so many different things going on in our modern homes that like they may not necessarily be used to, and I think that's going to be, you know, enough new stimuli to process than you know, than
absolutely
necessarily needing to
so
go
much.
out.
And again, if we think about it in terms of challenge, right? So think these are the layers of challenges, and there's only so many that anybody can cope with at one time, right? And so bringing them out, even if we say, oh, well, we're going to go out into like a field, or, you know, there's not going to be all these other things. Like, just think of the sensory overwhelm of that. Yeah. Just so much to process. So, and the other reason, you know, why people will balk at this is because they'll go, oh my God, 4 weeks without bringing a dog for a walk. Your dog's walks shouldn't be the focus of the exercise and entertainment for them. Any dog. They should, you know, enrichment isn't, or providing an enriched life isn't because we bring them for a walk. And sometimes I think there is this assumption that that's what that is. And you'll see things like, you know, this dog is looking for their forever sofa or something like that. And I'm like, no, dogs don't want a forever sofa. They might like a sofa, but it's not crucial. But they want an enriched life and world, right? And walks might be a tiny part of that. Might be. But if they're not providing benefit, then they're not enriching, right? So, you know, so I think it's an important realization. At the same time, dogs do need exercise and they do need entertainment. So, you know, so it's that nuance again. It's that gray area again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose there's always that kind of diminishing return as well from something. It's like, 30 minutes of a walk eventually for a dog in an area that's really cool and there's lots of new scents and sounds and potentially animals and trees and whatever, could potentially be really, really good for them. But then, 45 minutes, okay, it's not going to be that much better. And an hour, not that much better. And then, by the time you get to 4 hours, it's definitely not going to be 4 times more, 8 times more than the half hour of benefit. Eventually, they're going to be kind of like getting a bit sick of that part of their enrichment regime.
And particularly, like if we do walks from our point of view, like we walk on concrete paths and we go in straight lines. And like if you think about what dogs do, most dogs, or if you see some dogs, like I'm going to talk about some spaniels here now, like how they cover ground. Or if you ever see those, illustrations where they'll have like, this is the path that the human took, this is the dog.
Yeah.
Right. So, so if these walks are largely on lead in suburban areas on pathways, right, how much foot, like that might be cool for us, and we're counting, we've got our pedometer app and we're counting how many steps we've done and all of that, and our dogs are like, I don't care about that. I'm like, how many different substrates did I walk on? How much climbing did I do? How much sensory information did I take in? How much that's what they're doing, right? So there's a clash there between our cultural kind of preferences and what dogs need, I suppose, and it can depend on your individual dog. But our new dog doesn't need any extra challenge.
They don't need extra challenge.
Right.
What about, okay, so we don't have the extra challenge from going out and exploring even more new environments that are uncontrolled in particular, but maybe we might see that they might start getting a bit bored, might need some sort of mental enrichment, let's say. Are there tools that might be suggested?
Absolutely.
And,
so what I want, what I would love adopters to be doing is to be having lots of interactions with this dog that are all kind of hands off, because they don't need to have a load of touching right now. Again, if we just met somebody and so let's say you had, I don't know, a lodger come to stay in your house and they're going to rent a room in your house for 6 months, let's say. And the first couple of weeks home, you are not touching that person. You are not, cuddling them. You are not touching their head or scratching their butt. You're not doing any of those things, right? Because, you'd be arrested. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be correct. You should not have contact with the public. But we expect our dogs to tolerate our weird primate touching.
Yeah.
And I mean, even though we as humans have really strict rules about the context in which we, allow intimate touching, and it's very kind of contextual, and there's, extreme rules about kind of intimate and personal space and things like that, and
every culture is different.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And it might even be different for people of different genders. So it might be very different for me as a female, and it might be very different for somebody else. So, like for example, we'll even if we just talk about different age ranges. So like a 2-year-old climbing into my lap on a train would be quite funny, and I'd have a giggle with their carer or parent, right? A 42-year-old climbing into my lap on a train that I didn't know might be a very different outcome of all of that. He would be hurt if he tried it, put it that way. But like, we're so contextually driven. So like I'm, if I go to a hairdresser's, it's acceptable that person's going to touch my hair, right? Because, otherwise it would be pointless. But if I'm on a bus or a train and random person touches my hair, very different rules.
Even a podcaster probably wouldn't be expecting me to just reach out and touch your hair. I know we're talking virtually here, but even if we were in the same room, it would be a little bit strange.
No. There's no danger that I would be touching you if you were in the same room, but your hair would be safe, right? But we have such strict rules about it, and then we go to dogs. Oh, the first time we meet them, we touch their head, we lean into them, we put our arms around them, we touch, sensitive areas or areas that are difficult to protect, like their back ends and their feet and all these sorts of things. Yeah. And we expect them not only to like it, but also that if they tell us that they don't like it, then we're terribly offended, and we might even kill that dog if they've aggressed because we've, overstepped that mark. So again, I just want you to think of the new dog's experience, right? So we can do tons of stuff, and I want the new adopter to make all the good things happen. And one of the most relevant things to dogs is food. So we are going to be using all of this dog's food. They're going to get lots of food for free. They're going to get every time we turn up, there's going to be food scattered onto their bed. Every time we go into the garden, we're scattering and sniffing for food. We're hunting for food together. We're going to have lots of stuff. It's going to all be wonderful and fun. We're not going to expect them to, so people say, oh, he doesn't know what toys are. And that's not really true. We expect dogs to respond to the toys that we give them in the way via our lens. So they should fetch a ball, for example, right? Play is really, so we often say that eating is a barometer and sleeping is a barometer for the dog's experience. But you know what really is? Play really is. And true play won't be fetch games necessarily. And true play is a true barometer of how the animal feels. Because if they feel safe, they will let their guard down to do, behaviours that aren't vital for survival, right? Yeah. And when your brain is doing this to your body when you've just moved to a new home, it's survival mode. So we're not even capable of, getting into the thinking parts of the brain a whole lot. So we can't be expecting them to work out, and to learn lots of new, complex behaviours. They're learning about survival behaviours. They're learning about how do I feel safe? How do I stay safe? What do I need to do to get distance and social relief? What do I need to do to find safety? And that's what they're learning about at this time. So if we give them lots of danger in their life, or what would be perceived as danger by them, well, then that's what they're learning about. That's what you've set up then. That's how they view the world. Regardless of what came before, that's what we're doing right now. Yeah. So that's what's happening.
And I love that you've yet now mentioned quite a few activities that you can be doing, and presenting food all the time, and making them obviously feel like that they're at home. That doesn't sound boring at all. That sounds like you're going to have plenty of stuff to be doing, and probably smaller, shorter interactions, as opposed to drawing this out for, again, the hours and hours. It's going to be kind of probably, under 10-minute type of interaction.
Minutes. Yeah, absolutely. And at a distance. And I like to think, I like to train in life. So I like to think about how would I like to live with this dog? Where is this going? So for example, if I'm cooking, I'll say to people, think about the context. When I am, my dog is. So when I am cooking, I'm going to be tossing food over there for my new dog. So he's learning that if he stays on his bed while I'm cooking, so he's not under the table, that if I'm eating at the table, he has a wonderful stuffed chew toy over there. So again, we're setting up, we are doing training, but we're setting up how we'll live together, right? And then that also helps us to identify biomarkers. So for example, behavior markers, sorry. For example, we might say, well, I want to start introducing new people because there's going to be, these people are going to come over, or we're going to have a family gathering, or, Christmas is coming up, so there's all that. So the behavior markers for me then are, can this dog settle when familiar people are there? And our goal always is, at each of these criteria kind of points, the goal is that the dog is doing so what behaviors. They're like, yeah, so what, there's people here. So what, there's the other dog. So what, there's a bus. So what, the fridge clicking, right? So we want to get to, so not vastly positive or exciting, not terrifying and negative, but just life, right?
And I think that's kind of the stumbling block for a lot of us as well, isn't it? It's that we expect to see this Hollywood version of dogs around our friends and
Disney,
family and exactly. And it's like, your dog isn't Pluto.
Yes. I'd love my dog to be Pluto.
Yeah, I know, but it's Scooby-Doo is not a real dog.
Like all my childhood dogs, right? Those dogs that just stay with you. Tramp from Lady and the Tramp is
101 Dalmatians, all of
the Dalmatians. 101, please.
Exactly. So I think we need to give ourselves and our dogs a little bit more credit, and say that they have their own personalities, and and that we shouldn't really have the expectations of, them to be a Hollywood star or a
Yes,
cartoon.
for sure.
Um,
No
that
more than no more than I'm going to be Hollywood star.
exactly.
The reality of this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
So if we're thinking about that, then our behavior markers would be that this dog can settle when there's familiar people there, and that we have started to teach them some skills, some settling skills. Eating is a behavior. And we want to teach that dog to eat under certain conditions. So I had mentioned there that I want him to have a stuffed chew toy over there while I sit at the table and eat my meal. That's a skill that he has to develop, right? We take that for granted, but that's behavior that we teach him. And if that dog can settle over there when familiar people are just watching TV or just hanging out or on their phones or whatever, then I might say, okay, well, now we start to have skills for bringing new people in. And we'll develop a specific guest greeting routine. And your guest greeting routines that you establish for your dog should always be the dog coming in on the new person, not the new person coming in on the dog. It's the way to future-proof this. So we might do something like we'll have our guests or whoever, they'll text when they're out at the car. We'll come out with our dog. We'll, on lead, obviously. We'll walk behind them. The guests will come in and sit down. We'll bring our new dog in on top of them. Or if the weather's crappy, we'll have the new dog in another room and our guests will come in and settle. And when they're settled, we bring the new dog in. We immediately scatter the chicken because new guests make chicken rain from the sky. It's amazing. It's this weird thing that happens, right?
yeah.
We'll keep them on lead for everybody's safety and the jumping up. And again, we're thinking about establishing calmness for later on,
Yeah.
right? So if we never let them practice the crazy stuff, the stuff we won't like, then it's not going to be an issue. So we facilitate that with our new dog. And we have the most amazing stuffed chew toy with like, oh my God, the best pate or something in it in there, and that's ready for them. So our expectations of our new dogs is that, yeah, new people come in, but I get to sniff, which helps calm me. I get to chew, which helps calm me. These new people don't put a ton of social pressure on me. So they're just like part of the furniture, or that's what they're becoming, right? So again, our goal is the so what response. Oh yeah, new people. Yeah, you're lovely, but like, so what? Get over
Yeah. Things to do.
I'm over
firstly,
here with this. Yeah. So we're facilitating. So what can the dog expect from all of these things? Because remember, you have a bit of a clean slate. There is a benefit to the dog not having a lot of experience here, right? Providing we take advantage of it correctly. It's when we don't. It's when we bring the person in and the big tall guy comes in and the tiny little dog and that's it. Then that dog's expectation of new people coming in this place, because this is the first time this happened, and it was this terrifying tall guy who wasn't doing anything wrong or intentionally bad, but he just is terrifying for this dog, right? And big deep voice, and hi. And this poor little dog was like, oh jeepers, I was just starting to feel a little bit safer, and you've moved the goalposts on me. So that would be some examples of behavior markers for where we're going. And then the same kind of thing for for integrating with our new pets. So the same thing. Can we get that so what response when they're out on a walk together? Right? Parallel walking, apart from one another. Yeah, there's that fella. Seen him before. Whatever. Right? Can I get that so what response in the garden? Can I get that so what response in a space that's quite large and has no real resources there? So there's no food available, there's no toy. So that's the criteria, that's the behavior marker at each point. It's that so what response at each of those stages. So we're never putting the dogs or the dog and the cat or the dog and the guest or whoever in a situation where they get to rehearse those bad first impressions, right? Or rehearse excitable behaviors.
And by the time you're actually introducing them to strangers, and strangers being of all species,
Yes.
that like you've already said that you've kind of practiced some skills, and they're like the building blocks of your relationship. Then that you can kind of say, in this situation this happens, in this situation this happens, in this situation you get a stuffed Kong, and you bring kind of some normality into the new as well, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And it's, think about, what can this dog expect from this next thing that's about to happen? What am I teaching them to expect? Because that's what learning is about. Learning is about learning stimuli that tell you something is going to happen, and you having some time, then your body having some time to prepare you. So your brain prepares you with the behaviors you're going to need. So if the dog expects that this is going to be an emotionally exciting thing. So we had talked about arousal and valence earlier on. So it's going to be an exciting thing that might have whatever different valence behind it. So it might be fearful, might be just winding up, right? Just really losing control, excitability, might be terror, might be, aggression. So if those are the expectations that are behind that, right, that's what that dog is learning. And they're learning that most efficiently during this period when they're most vulnerable. Right? So that's why we want to look at establishing all of these very, very simple skills that people don't even think are training exercises. So people think when we say training exercises are skills, the dog is learning to sit or whatever. I don't care about sitting.
Yeah.
I don't care about it. I care about what are the behaviors this dog is going to need to do to live in this world.
Yeah.
So that he gets to stay there, because I don't want this dog moving again, right? Because it's hard. And I don't want to put that family through it, and I don't want to put the rescue organization through it, because they've filled that space, I'm sure, several times over, right?
Yeah.
By the time this dog has moved on. So that's our first kind of part of this. And then the next parts will be bringing them out into the uncontrolled world. And so what are our behavior markers there? So one of the things that we'll do while they're on lockdown, essentially, is we'll be teaching them the skills they'll need for going out into the controlled environments. So, for example, teaching them to be comfortable to have their harness or collar or lead or whatever put on. Like, that's a big thing, right?
Sure.
So if we teach them that, where there's no going out after it, they just learn it as another skill, right? It's not this huge, massively exciting, crazy situation. We teach them how to engage. So if I look at my person, good things happen. We teach them how to sniff for food on cue. So I'll say, go find it. And that dog puts their nose to the floor because there's things to sniff, right? We'll teach that dog that home is a safe base. So for example, I might spend quite a bit of time just hanging out at the front door. My dog is on a long line. They get to sniff the air. They get to wander back and forward. They're just learning that they can always get home. Right? Just in a few steps we can get back in. I might need to teach them how to be comfortable in the car, because I live in a really urban or suburban area, and those local walks just won't work for us yet until we have more skills. So I want to drive them to a wider open space. I want the adopter to have time to develop long line skills so they can handle a long line so that their dog can have lots of space. The adopter develops skills in delivering reinforcers, in spotting behaviors that are reinforceable, and also in environmental awareness. So bring that dog out into the middle of the pitch rather than where all the joggers are running by them. So that, again, their first experiences in these places aren't overwhelming, right? Aren't a big deal.
What I love about what you just said there is, kind of, it made me think about the fact that we don't always have to do the full thing. You can stand in the door with it open and just look out. You mentioned the car, and I think, it goes back to the car training as well for many dogs. You don't necessarily need to get in the car, buckle up, drive for 4 hours. You don't, like, it doesn't have to be a whole ordeal. You don't need to complete the full trilogy of the books in the day. You can just start off with one page and just have a sniff in the car door, whatever it is. It's like it doesn't have to be all of the things.
And all of that time we were on lockdown during that honeymoon period, what are the things we could be practicing? We could be having our licky mat in the back seat of the car, right?
Yeah.
What's our dog's expectation of getting in the car? A lovely thing, a calming activity. My human is just there. Not totally accessible right now, but they're just there and it's all safe. And then we go back in and it's no big deal.
Yeah.
And then we might pull out of the drive and back in. And go back in and it's no big deal, and the dog goes, oh yeah, that's so what are those expectations? What are we setting up for them?
What's happening?
What's coming next?
What little steps can we take on a day-to-day basis? So it's
for sure.
Just break it down for yourself and for the dog, and you're kind of like on the right path then, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, throughout all of this, like, we do this where we kind of go, well, how are you going to live with this dog? So where is the dog going to sleep? Where are they going to eat? We have to be aware of those things so that our dog can learn those things, because we have to set up their world for them to learn that. So if we think about sleeping, like, people will talk about, oh, the first night he was really quiet. That's because he didn't know where he was. So he was just like, what the is going on here, right? And then the second night there was screaming, and then that went on for 3 nights, and we just ignored it, and now there's no screaming. And I just want you to think about that, right? We've brought this dog from a place, again, where they might have experienced a lot of social isolation for sure, but that social isolation has an impact on them. And one of the things that we know about dogs is that they tend to be social sleepers, like us. So they get some comfort from sleeping close to conspecifics. So it doesn't mean you have to sleep on top of them, but just knowing that they're there.
Yeah.
Right. So, and this is like if you're in your home and your partner is out and you're sleeping on your own, you know, you hear all the creaks that you never heard before. You hear the winds, and you're like, I never noticed that before, right? And again, it's because our vigilance is up, so we're suddenly noticing where's the monster coming from, and it's the same for these dogs. So, and again, this might also be an unpopular thing. I always start new dogs super close to the bed, to me, to my bed, and once I establish sleeping, and they'll probably be in a crate or they'll be in some sort of confinement. Again, another life skill, learning how to be behind a barrier, but they'll be might be right beside my bed. Now, if they're teeny tiny, if they're puppies, the crate will usually be on the bed beside me. So it's you know, right there. But obviously if they're bigger, that's not going to work. But I don't know this dog, and this dog doesn't know me. And I don't want to put that dog in a situation where they get startled by me moving in my sleep or something like that, right? And remember where their brain is. They're all Mr. Vigilant, right? So they're going to be behind some sort of barrier, but I'm going to be super close to them. They're going to be really near me. I am going to have lots of food beside my bed, so I'm ready to, and often what I'll just have is like a spoon with peanut butter on it that I can just stick down to them and let them lap a little bit, lap themselves back to sleep. Or maybe we have to go out and do toilet breaks overnight, which is often going to be the case. Even when they're not puppies, that will be necessary, right? So I want to wake them up rather than them waking me up. Right. So I might set the alarm for 4 a.m. or whatever it is, and get them out to go to the toilet, and then we'll settle back down to bed. But the goal here is that they never get to practice being distressed on their own, being distressed at night, and they're not learning under my watch that their behaviour doesn't matter. So if they scream and nobody comes for them, what does that tell them about the social relationship we're developing? What does that tell them about feeling safe? And most importantly, stress happens, and we've talked about this before, stress happens because we feel that our world is unpredictable and uncontrollable. So we can't tell what's about to happen. We don't know where the monster is. And we don't have behavioural skills. We don't have the behaviours to control what happens to us. So if that dog is screaming and whining and crying or distressed, and that doesn't get them what they want, which is reuniting, they're learning their behaviour doesn't matter. And they're learning that their most distressed behaviour doesn't matter, doesn't get them what they need. So they're not barking and crying and whining and screaming because they're being a nuisance or because they're trying to manipulate you. They want social reassurance.
Yeah.
They want to know you're there. Now, once we establish sleeping, then I move them to the end of the bed. Then I move them to the door. Then I can move them to, you know, the next, to wherever I want them to ultimately sleep. But I'm starting them really, really close to me so that we don't ever rehearse, you know, sleepless nights, basically. And we're not setting up a relationship where, you know, again, this great distress when they were separated from me because they were way down in the kitchen and I was way up here at night. And then when we reunite, they're like, oh my God, thank God you're back. Oh my God.
Yes. You're kind of adding a lot of energy in both ends of the spectrum.
Yes, yeah. And we're fueling the further development of separation related behaviours then as well.
Sure.
Right.
And I think like what I really like about that as well is that you're like really reinforcing the idea of breaking things down into simple steps. It's all about, you know, moving them away from the bed and, you know, making things just that step-by-step approach. And I think this must be, or I'm guessing this is really the whole essence of this whole relationship building, right? It's no matter what element of it you look at, you're going to have to break it down into manageable steps and you know, get incrementally that tiny little bit more challenging and you know, closer to maybe where you want to be with your relationship one day.
Yes. And the most important part of that is that the dog's behaviour is information. So they're telling us when they're ready for the next step. So instead of us going, oh, well, he's crying at night. Right, he's crying at night, but that's information rather than some failure, rather than some manipulation. That's information telling us we've just moved too fast too soon. So let's go back to the last point at which everybody slept and we'll build again. And it's not some failure, it's not a problem. It's just, behavior is just information. That's all it is. It's a data point. And it gives us that information so we can adjust our plan.
And even feeling like a failure, it's not like, it's not like, it's unlikely if you're breaking it down into very small increments,
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little step back, and none of us like that because we're so progress driven, and we're taught from a young age that we all have to go linearly towards the goal. But
really
like, a little step back isn't really, you're still like, probably 14 steps of the 114,
Absolutely.
you're still on the right track. Yeah.
I love behavior. Like, it is I can't describe to you how much I love it. It is infinitely modifiable. It is so pliable. And understanding this idea, exactly what you're talking about, is so important, even just in my day-to-day life, in that, okay, we've had this trip, right? So some challenge has arisen, and it happens because dogs have bad days and people have bad days. So you can be doing all the right thing and you have the great program, and there'll still be, not having a great day. The dog isn't having a great day for whatever reason. And because we're these complex biological messes, it's going to happen. And the wonderful thing is that behavior is there, and we can just readjust our plan and build again. And it's just information. So it's this fantastic confidence building thing, not just for the dog, but also for the person. And also, so I absolutely love that. I love when we get the opportunity to readjust our program according to the dog's behavior. Because what I'll always say is, I write 1/3 of the plan, my client writes 1/3, and then the dog writes the other third. And so I might say you're going to do all these things, but then how the client lives it is their contribution. But they can plan. It only happens to the dog. So it's going to take us a few weeks for us to see the effects of, these behavior changes, or to make behavior observations. So they're going to, it's a bit of a longer term dialogue we're having with them, that they're going to say, and then I'm going to say, okay, dog, you've told me that doesn't work in this way for you. So this is how we adjust, and then you get to give me that feedback again. And as a teacher, that's my favorite thing. I love getting feedback from my students. Yeah, that's the best part of it, right? Of course. So just think of it as that feedback, and it's not negative or positive. It's just information. It's totally neutral. It's just telling you, and it's so useful then for us to forge and adjust our plan. And the thing to remember is that behavior is in the environment. Right? It's not just information, it's in the environment. So we can we don't have to try to adjust or change the dog. That's not the point. We just have to make little environmental substitutions or adjustments. So bring him back to the end of the bed. We're just changing that picture, and we're going to build again. And that's it. Yeah. And then we'll just go forward. And now we know. Fantastic. So I love that.
Now it's so possible and doable.
Yes, it's so doable. So we call this technique of breaking down bigger behaviours into smaller bits and working off of a plan of successive approximations. We call that shaping. And there's a couple of different types of shaping, but just in general, that's what shaping is. And we've all experienced it. Right, so like our first day of school, they didn't kind of put encyclopedias in front of us and expect us to read them, right? So we weren't able to do that. Or your first day driving, you weren't kind of out on the autobahn and just left your own devices, right? But we tend to have a coercive and punishment-based society. So when you don't meet these pre-established criterion, it's very aversive, right, in our society. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And we don't need failure to learn. We don't need to make mistakes to learn. This is a central tenet of B.F. Skinner's work, is that failure isn't required to learn. Mistakes aren't required to learn. So we've been programmed culturally to believe that, right? But that's not the case. We just make the slices, the little kind of successful approximations a little bit smaller. And so it's doable. And the ability to do it is the feedback from your learner or yourself.
I love that. Yeah. Absolutely. Be a little bit kinder to yourself. Absolutely. The little successes. Celebrate the little successes.
Yes, absolutely. Or plus for every single stage. So eat the chocolate. Absolutely. Whatever works for you. Scroll on the phone. Set up these little opportunities to shape your behaviour. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. on that positive note, I think this is where we're going to wrap this episode up.
Fantastic.
I think people realize what a challenge it is, but I'm
Yeah.
sure like how rewarding it can be if you see
Yeah.
how many steps could potentially be there, and then break them up into even
Yeah.
smaller steps so you can make them
Yeah.
possible for yourself.
And I think it's important to recognize that lots of these dogs will be fine, right? They'll just be fine. Some of them won't be fine, but it won't be obvious to their human carers that they're not fine. And some of these dogs, what we do during this time will contribute to them developing behaviours of concern. And more importantly, will contribute to them developing behaviours that humans find problematic.
Yeah.
And that's when they come see people like me. And it would be so much better if we could get in there earlier and be there to help set up this program before it happens, and to be there to help people in whatever way that has to happen. And what I will say to rescues is, and I've always done this, is that if there is a dog that you need help with in whatever way, that dog is under your care, you just come and you'll come talk to me, send an email or get in touch by message or whatever, all of the ways that you can get in touch, and we will do a remote session. We'll get everything started. We'll get all the ducks in the row. We'll do that, and it won't cost you anything. And we'll put this dog on hopefully get them on the right track to moving forward and getting them homed and getting their welfare sorted, basically. So that's absolutely available.
I love that. Thank you so much, Anne, for coming on and chatting with us and sharing. You are a fountain of knowledge and so appreciated. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks a million, Killian. Talk to you soon.
Chat soon.
Bye.
And once again, a huge thank you to Anne for coming on and sharing with us this week. It is so appreciated. And once again, thank you, our valued listener, for coming on and listening to this podcast. We, of course, always appreciate when you like, subscribe, share the different episodes, so that we're telling the algorithm that there is value to be had in this podcast. It does our guests so much justice when we kind of build it up a little bit and get it out to the people that really need to hear this information. As always, you can find loads of resources in our show notes, that being from Anne, from Anied, from Ruby Reese, and of course from dognutrition.ie as well. Thank you very much for listening in, and we hope to see you for another podcast episode very soon.